So here at the Washington, D.C. Auto Show with one of the most hotly anticipated vehicles, which is the Toyota 4Runner, okay? So behind me is the new Toyota 4Runner. This thing looks awesome. I mean, it really does. I think I'm gonna take a walk around it, kind of look at some of the styling features. All the vehicles are locked currently that are in the sort of special display area, but it's media day, so I'm gonna see if maybe later on we can open it up and take a look inside. I am very curious to take a look inside because at nearly 6'6", the interior amount of space inside is important to me. Megan and I are currently sort of thinking about a future vehicle for her as our last child becomes a driver, and this, as well as the Land Cruiser, are definitely high on the list. And so I'm curious, is it big enough? But exterior wise, let's kind of take a look at some of the sort of styling cues of the 4Runners past and present. And then I'm curious to know what you think about this vehicle compared to something like the Toyota Land Cruiser, or even the Highlander or the RAV4 or the Grand Highlander, because not everybody needs the 4Runner's capabilities. You just want the 4Runner's capabilities. So let's start with some of the powertrain basics, all right? Obviously, you get the same flavors of engine that you get on the Tacoma, right? You can just run this on regular fuel instead of premium. So the base engine is gonna be like 276 horsepower, 317 pound-feet of torque, somewhere in that range. And then you have the hybrid iForce Max engine, which has 326 horsepower and up to 465 pound-feet of torque. Now, a few months ago, I was able to go off-roading with the new TRD Pro, which is right over there. So the new TRD Pro and Trailhunter. And one of the nice things about having that hybrid powertrain off-road is that instant torque hit that the electric motor gives you. So if you have that kind of like, in your future plans, it's something to keep in mind. I don't think the base powertrain has any trouble motivating the Tacoma. It's not like fast, but it's not like slow. I think it'll be fine here too, but the numbers will be about the same, as is the general style. Now you can see here, this is where a lot of people have maybe a little bit of criticism about the 4Runner's looks, because it does essentially look just like the Tacoma up front, whereas previous 4Runners were sort of differentiated with their headlight and grille treatments and stuff like that. This one is more or less a Tacoma. And depending on your view of the Tacoma, that's a good or bad thing. I personally think the Tacoma looks pretty darn good, but I don't know if I'd want my 4Runner to look exactly the same. So I'm curious to know what you guys think. Is it a good thing or a bad thing that the 4Runner more or less looks like a Tacoma up front? Now, one area where the 4Runner differentiates itself from not just the Tacoma, but from other SUVs, more recent designs, is in this sort of back glass treatment, because it looks like 4Runners of the past. And so I really like kind of the profile of the 4Runner, the whole closed-in Tacoma look. It kind of works from the side view. I think the side view and maybe the front 3/4, the rear 3/4 is where the 4Runner looks the best. But that kind of back glass that goes up onto the roof, that is super cool. And I'm really glad that they did that. It's just such a subtle design cue that separates out the 4Runner from the competition. And come to think of it, that's what I'm sort of curious about. What is the competition for this 4Runner? Seriously, what is the competition for? You have an enclosed, fixed roof, off-road capable SUV, and there's not really a direct competitor. Most people compare the 4Runner to Jeeps and Broncos and stuff like that, but they all have removable panels and the 4Runner doesn't. And depending on what you plan to do with it, that could be a good or bad thing. But I think that gives the 4Runner a sort of unique position in the marketplace. Now, if you look at this sort of rear view of the 4Runner, this is where it is simultaneously kind of the most familiar and the least kind of a departure from 4Runners past. I don't think that's a bad thing. Let's be honest here. Let's be honest for a second when it comes to Toyotas. People that like Toyotas, and I would include myself in this category, but maybe not to this extent, but Megan and I own several Toyotas now. People who like Toyotas don't always like change. And I think keeping the 4Runner overall shape and rear end very familiar, it's instantly identifiable as a 4Runner, which is something I said about the Tacoma when the Tacoma came out, right? When I went to the Tacoma launch, and I'll put these links in the description, I was struck by how even though the Tacoma looked very updated, it still was instantly identifiable as a Toyota Tacoma. And I think the 4Runner is largely the same here. This immediately evokes 4Runner to me. And so a radical departure in the rear maybe wouldn't have been the right move, and I think Toyota nailed it with this design. Now we have to talk price for a little bit, because 4Runner ain't cheap, and I'll put some of the prices for some of the trims on screen, but this is a TRD Sport model with some options. Now, we don't have a build sheet for it, so it's impossible to know how many, but a lot of people complain that like, oh, you know, the Tacoma got more expensive and now the 4Runner's getting more expensive. I don't know if you've noticed, all cars are more expensive. Car prices in general have gone up, and it's largely due to our own willingness to pay ridiculous amounts of money for cars and finance them for a ridiculous amount of time, as well as simultaneously demand that they be stuffed with a ton of technology and features. And so that comes at a cost. So you look at this TRD Pro Tacoma right here, which is listed for $67,000, and you're like, that seems crazy. That seems like a lot of money. And you look at this TRD Sport 4Runner, which is also expensive for what it is, but yet we continue to pay it. So I don't really fault Toyota. I don't really fault any of the brands, to be honest with you. I know that sounds kind of odd to say, like, I'm not blaming these companies for like charging a lot of money for their cars, but we have proven to be willing to do that. Why do you think full-size pickup trucks cost darn near $100,000? So I'm not really that worried about the 4Runner pricing. I think we've proven that we would rather pay a normal amount of money for something like a CR-V or a RAV4 or a Mazda CX-5 if that's what we're going to use every day. So if you think that the 4Runner's capabilities or style or performance or whatever are going to win you over, then you should sort of budget for that if you want a 4Runner. And then, you know, there's always the used market. Those 5th gens, they ain't going down in price though. So by the way, we've got the 4Runner behind me. You can see the Toyota 4Runner behind me there. And then in front of me, which is now behind me so you can see it, we have the Toyota Land Cruiser. All right, so you got the Land Cruiser and you got the 4Runner. This is a TRD Sport 4Runner, and this is a 1958 edition Land Cruiser. And so that 1958 edition Land Cruiser is going to be in the mid-50s, and this TRD Sport 4Runner is probably going to be, I don't know, like the mid-40s. I'll put the price on screen because they don't have it. This is a prototype model. But what are your thoughts on this, right? Like, the Land Cruiser looks awesome. It looks fantastic. Full-time 4-wheel drive, right? And you've got the hybrid max powertrain as sort of like the standard option. So you get that like 465 pound-feet of torque. Then you got the 4Runner here. This would have, this TRD Sport would have the lower engine option, the regular iForce one, so 276 and like 317. So what are your thoughts on that kind of pricing structure and the overlap between the 4Runner and the Land Cruiser? Now check this out. From a cargo carrying standpoint, I gotta walk around the sign here. From a cargo carrying standpoint, the Toyota 4Runner has up to 48 cubic feet of cargo space because this is the non-hybrid version. So one of the advantages that the Toyota 4Runner has compared to the Toyota Land Cruiser is the fact that you can get it with the non-hybrid engine. So if you get the regular iForce engine in this, you get up to 48 cubic feet of cargo space, whereas with the hybrid powertrain, you get more like 38 cubic feet of cargo space, which is the same as the Toyota Land Cruiser. So because the Land Cruiser is iForce Max only, and the 4Runner gives you the option, if you get, let's say, a TRD off-road with the standard powertrain, you get sort of the best of both worlds, a lot of off-road capability and a lot of cargo space. 48 cubic feet of cargo space is nothing to sneeze at. So I'm curious to know what you think about the Toyota 4Runner. Do you think that the 4Runner is going to be a smash hit and sell like gangbusters and be as popular and beloved as the previous 4Runners have been? Or do you think that the Toyota 4Runner is maybe a little bit of a dilution of the Toyota SUV lineup? There is, and we can take a look at this, there is a lot of variety in the Toyota SUV lineup. There are a ton of models. However, when you see them side by side, you see the 4Runner and the Land Cruiser side by side, they don't necessarily overlap maybe as much as you might think. And that's coming from someone who is extremely interested in the Land Cruiser. So I'd be curious to know what you think from a price standpoint, from a capability standpoint, from a usage standpoint. What do you think of the 4Runner, and what do you think of its place in the Toyota SUV lineup? All right. Thanks so much for watching. Check the links down below for more content on some of these vehicles, and we'll see you in the next one.